All right, so after we've pulled the driver's side down, the passenger side down, and again, we just use the same corrugation through the roof, dive over to the side, and continue on. We have our smart ends now coming out underneath the seat. What I do now is I take the tape off and separate the blacks from the reds. Okay, so we're actually going to create a common ground with the blacks and strip the ends of 3 and place them into one large ring. And we'll crimp these 3 together and put heat shrink on it. And then we'll take the other 3 blacks and we will do the same with the other ring, and we'll create 2 common grounds, and then we will put those over the grounds, the factory grounds down here on the bottom of the seat. You can see the post right here. So when we make our common grounds, we'll slip them over that post and be grounding right to the same OEM place into the chassis. With the reds, we separated the reds over to the other side, and with the reds, we're going to take these little horseshoe shaped clips here, these terminals, and we're going to strip the ends off of the reds, crimp these on and heat shrink these, and these will slip into the fuse block. Once we put all of these terminal ends onto the smart end of our harness, we'll disconnect this carriage right here, flip it sideways, mount our wires into our fuse block, and then mount the fuse block to this piece of plastic and roll it back into place. So that's the overview of the workflow, and now we'll just show you each detail. All right, guys, so I stripped off the end here. I'm gonna clip a little bit more. Actually, that was terrible. All right, to put these ends on, you're going to take about 1/4 of an inch off the end and slip it into the end of the hole there. I use these guys for wire crimpers. Wire crimpers, if you find good ones, you can please respond with ones that you like, that work well, because we're always in search for better wire crimpers. I use this, and here you use the notch here if you do not have a coating on it. I use the back of the crimper so that it does not tear the heat shrink. So it's crimped on there, hard enough not to come off, but not hard enough to tear into the heat shrink. Then I take, right now since I'm out here and we're not running electricity, I just use these little jet lighter. And I use that to set the heat shrink. If you have electricity, I highly suggest using a heat gun. It's a much more effective way, and it also will not burn the wire. I've done this quite a bit, so the trick here is rotating it often. Keep it moving, and you're really just getting it to shrink and have the glue set and stick to the wire. This will solidify the connection. So we're going to do this on each of the red wires, and then we'll catch up with you when we start putting the common grounds together. All right, so here's what I was talking about with the common ground. You're going to take off a little bit more off the edge, probably about a 1/2 inch instead of a 1/4 inch. The three of them come together, and you'll put all three of them into one ring terminal, okay? And then, depending on what you have to crimp these ring terminals, you can set them with you can do a couple different things. I've put a block down and run a punch and set a punch right into it and crimped them that way. You can have a giant looming set of crimpers that are floating around and just bring them in off screen if you have them, like a magic trick. And then crimp it,
the mother of all,
and then make it disappear like that, like magic. So anyway, once it's crimped, now we want to put the heat shrink on it. Seal it up and then throw it on the OEM post down there. All right, so if you look down here, you use your 10mm socket and you pull off the nut, and you can set your grounds on the post. Put the nut back on and make sure when you tighten this that you tighten it good and tight. You need at least 40 pounds of pressure so that nothing arcs, but you don't want to obviously over tighten it, but just tighten it back down. Now you are grounded. With these red ends here, we can now take our fuse block and again, this is just sort of clips, a little push on there, unclip it. And we provide 6 of the fuses there. And at this point, you now are going to put your fuses onto the fuse block, or your lines onto your fuse block. You'll notice that each of these red lines have a color wrapped around it. And these are to illustrate the different terminals on the other side. So for instance, if it's wrapped in white, it is the fan. Okay, if it's wrapped in blue, they are the USBs and 12-volt lines. If it's wrapped in purple, it is the second auxiliary wire that comes out behind the sliding door. If it's wrapped in orange, it's the first auxiliary that comes out underneath the passenger seat. And if it's wrapped in yellow, it is of course yellow, like the lights. So you can put them on in any fashion you want. I usually just start with the lights being the first one, the fans being the second one, the USBs being the next 2, and then I leave these unattached until I need them. So I'll do that now.
Okay, we're live.
So I'm just using a Phillips headed screwdriver, slipping them on the ends. One of these blues goes to the passenger side and one goes to the driver's side. So you can make a note on the little stickers that come with the fuse block which one you put on first. So I'm putting the driver's side in first. And then I'm putting the passenger side on the second one. Okay. When this is hooked on, you can now take, for this setup right now, we have the OEM auxiliary battery. So this is the connection that we use for that. If you don't have the auxiliary battery, again, you do not have this breaker. You just plug your fuse into the front like we showed in the OEM connection to the chassis battery, and you come up and you plug the other end of that cable directly on to your fuse block. But if you have the OEM auxiliary battery, you want to pass it from the OEM terminal block here, and we put it on the driver's side onto this little block, and we run it through the 100 amp breaker and then into the fuse block. Now, before you mount the fuse to this little carriage here and the circuit breaker to the carriage, you want to connect everything, because once you've mounted it here, to try and wire it up afterwards is a real pain in the butt. So I'm just going to connect all of my terminals to all the points. Now that everything is unplugged from the vehicle and there's no electricity flowing here, I'm going to connect everything. Then we'll pull off the carriage and mount this, roll it back over, put all the seats back on, and we are done with the electrical and as far as the smart end is concerned. Now, after I hooked everything up, it's time to pull this little carriage out, and it takes a T20, and there's just these 4 little screws to remove. And it's awesome if you have a third hand that just comes out of nowhere. Also very helpful if you can get one of those. So after you decouple the carriage from the base, I like to put this on to the passenger side, and I float it over to the side. I'm going to use the self-tapping screw right through this side right here, and connect this to that piece of plastic. And I don't reef down on it. In fact, I back it off a little bit. So you're not trying to crack the plastic and be overly aggressive with it. You're just setting it up there so it is held in place nicely and firmly. Okay, and then once the other side is in, you can kind of get it nice and snug. Okay, but as you can see, I'm not reefing down on it to where it's warping anything over here. It's just snug. And we have the other side now, which is this one, the breaker. And we're going to do the same thing. And set some screws through the other side. And you can also punch holes here and run through bolts. If you would like. That's also a really effective way to do it. Just get it tilted up so I can get access. Okay, everything is connected now. So we can set this back over where it was and reconnect it. When we're done with this, we'll replace the seat and plug everything back in. I will leave the breaker off and disconnected. You can see here that the breaker can be closed or opened. I'm going to keep it opened and not working until we plug in all of the terminals onto the dummy side of the wiring harness.